The thing I keep coming back to when I think about Black Hollow is that Dale was calm the entire time, not in the way a person stays calm because they're trained to, or because they're managing a crisis in performing composure for the group. He was calm the way a person is calm when nothing happening is a surprise. I think about that a lot. I think about how he must have already known before we left the trailhead how the day was going to unfold. And I think about how he briefed us anyway, handed out the cards, checked our packs, and sent us in. My name is Evan Lowe. I was 31 the year this happened, which was 2019. I'd finished my basic SAR certification through the county that March and had done 2 call-outs over the spring, both of them straightforward. One was a lost day hiker on Brennan Ridge who turned up dehydrated on a fire road about 2 miles from his car. The other was a teenager who'd gotten separated from a church group near Carver Lake and was found within 3 hours, cold and embarrassed but fine. Those are the ones that go right. Most searches go right. That's something people don't understand about volunteer search and rescue. It's mostly walking. Walking in a line, calling out, checking ravines and creek beds and deadfall. You move slowly, you stay systematic, and eventually you find the person sitting on a log wondering why it took so long. Black Hollow was different, and everyone on the team seemed to know it before I did. The call-out came on a Thursday in late October. I was at work. I do electrical estimating for a commercial contractor, and I got the page around 1:15 p.m. Missing person in the Black Hollow drainage, adult male 58, name of Gerald Trent. He'd been doing a solo day hike on the Ridgeline Loop Trail, which cuts along the eastern edge of the drainage, and had failed to check in with his wife by noon. His car was still at the trailhead. The initial hasty team, 2 guys from the county's core squad, had been in since morning and found his pack about a quarter mile off the maintained trail, sitting upright against a tree, with the hip belt still buckled. No sign of Trent himself. No tracks leading away from the pack in any obvious direction. This was enough to escalate to a full volunteer call-out. I drove out after work. The staging area was a gravel pull-off at the Black Hollow trailhead, which is at the end of a county road that winds through about 8 miles of nothing after you pass the last farm. I'd never been to this particular trailhead. I'd hiked other parts of the national forest plenty, but Black Hollow drains into a valley that's steep and densely wooded and doesn't have much recreational appeal. No lake, no vista, no campground, just deep timber and sandstone ravines. There were about 15 people at the staging area when I arrived. I recognized maybe half of them from training or from the prior call-outs. A few were standing around the back of Dale's truck where he had a topo map spread over the tailgate. Dale Machin was the search coordinator, had been for Franklin County for over 20 years. He was in his mid-60s, lean, white hair cut close, the kind of person who communicated mostly through brevity and physical competence. He'd worked for the Forest Service before retirement and had been running volunteer SAR as a way to stay useful, which I respected. He was good at it, efficient, clear, no wasted words. I checked in, got my team assignment. I was on Team 3 with a woman named Ruth Kimball, who I'd met once during certification, and a man named Paulson. I never got his first name, who'd apparently been on the squad for years. We were given a search sector on the south-facing slope of the drainage, below and west of where Trent's pack had been found. Before we broke into our teams, Dale called everyone together for the briefing. This was normal. What was not normal was the laminated card he handed to each of us, attached to a lanyard alongside our team badges. I looked at mine. It was titled Black Hollow Operational Protocol Active Search, and it listed 6 rules specific to the Black Hollow drainage. I read them standing there in the fading afternoon light, and I'll be honest, my first reaction was mild confusion. I understood rules 1 and 4, staying together and being cautious about voices in the woods that tracked with basic SAR awareness. Even Rule 6, about spatial disorientation, seemed like a reasonable if oddly specific precaution for rugged terrain with poor GPS coverage. But Rules 2 and 3 bothered me. Rule 2 said if you find the missing person, don't approach alone and don't stay with them if you can't raise anyone on the radio. That ran against everything I'd been taught. In SAR training, you stay with the subject, you provide first aid, you reassure them, you are the link between them and extraction. Why would you leave? And Rule 3, don't follow any trail not on the map. Okay, there are unmaintained social trails everywhere in a national forest. Hunters make them, deer make them. They dead end or loop or peter out. But the phrasing was specific in a way that made me uneasy. It didn't say, be cautious of unofficial trails. It said, do not follow them. And it said, even if it appears to lead toward the subject. That caveat changed the entire character of the instruction. It anticipated a scenario in which abandoning a promising lead was the correct choice. That's not standard. I looked at Ruth, who was reading hers. She had the expression of someone rereading something she'd read before. Not confusion. Recognition. You've done a search here before? I asked. She folded the card over and tucked it under her collar. Once, 3 years ago. They give these out every time. Every time it's Black Hollow. Did they explain why? She looked at me, and I could see her deciding how much to say. Dale will answer questions if you ask him direct, but he doesn't volunteer it. My advice is to just follow the card. She said it kindly, but it was final. I let it go. Dale's verbal briefing covered the standard information: Trent's physical description, his known medical conditions, the planned search grid, radio frequencies, turnaround time. Then he paused, looked at the group, and said something I've replayed in my memory many times since. Some of you have worked Black Hollow before. Some of you haven't. The supplemental card is not optional. If you're not willing to follow it, tell me now, and I'll reassign you to a support role at base. No judgment, but I need to know before you go in. Nobody stepped out. One more thing, he said. If at any point tonight something doesn't feel right, and I mean that broadly, you stop, you radio, and you wait. I don't care if you can't articulate what's wrong. I trust your instincts more than I trust the terrain in there. You feel off. You call it in. Then he told us to move out. We entered the tree line in our teams around 5:40 p.m. We had maybe an hour and a half of usable daylight left, which meant this was going to be a night search. I had my headlamp, my handheld radio, a whistle on my vest, flagging tape, a GPS unit that Dale had issued, and the laminated card. Ruth carried the team's SAR pack with the first aid kit, space blankets, and a small thermos. Paulson had a larger pack with extra water and a rope kit in case we needed to move through steep terrain. The descent into the drainage was immediate and steep. The forest was mostly second-growth hardwoods, oak, beech, some hemlock in the deeper draws, and the understory was thick with mountain laurel that grabbed at our legs and funneled us into narrow corridors between the ridges. The leaf litter was deep and wet, and after about 20 minutes, I could no longer hear any of the other teams. Sound behaved strangely in the drainage. It didn't echo. It just stopped, like the trees absorbed it. We moved in a loose triangle, Ruth on point, Paulson to my left, me slightly behind. I could always see at least one of them. Rule 1. We called out Trent's name every 30 seconds, listened, called again. No response. The GPS put us on bearing, working slowly west across the slope. Around 6:15, we lost the daylight. The canopy was heavy enough that the transition was fast. Not a gradual dimming, but a kind of collapse, like someone turning down a dial. We switched to headlamps and kept moving. The temperature dropped maybe 10 degrees in the first hour of darkness. My breath started showing. It was Paulson who first brought up the drainage's history. We'd been walking in near silence for a while, and he said, without prompting, "You know how many searches have been run in this drainage in the last 30 years? I didn't. 14. Dale could tell you each one from memory. 12 of those subjects were found. I did the math. 2 weren't. 1 in 04 and 1 in 11, both solo hikers. Both had their gear found, but no body recovered. That's not unheard of, I said. Steep terrain, water features, animal activity. Sure, he said, except in both cases the gear was found in good condition. Packs upright, no sign of a fall, no sign of an animal encounter, no sign of weather exposure. The '04 case, the man's water bottle was still in the side pocket, half full. His GPS was on and functioning. His last waypoint was recorded at a location about 500 meters from where the pack was found, but the terrain between those 2 points is a 70-degree sandstone face. He didn't walk there. The pack didn't roll there. It was just there. I didn't say anything. The 11 case was a woman. Similar setup. Pack found off trail, neatly placed. She'd been doing bird surveys for the university. Her field notebook was in the pack, and the last entry was a description of a clearing she'd found. She noted it was approximately 100 meters east of her GPS position, but she also noted that she couldn't reconcile the clearing with the topo map. She wrote, and this is a direct quote because I've read the report, "There is a clearing here with what appears to be a stone foundation, but nothing on the map or in the historical survey indicates any structure in this drainage." Then nothing. That was her last entry. I felt the laminated card against my chest. Rule 5. Do not enter any standing structure. Do not examine it. Do not photograph it. Dale was coordinator for both of those searches, Paulson said. He's the one who wrote the card. We kept walking. I understood now that the rules weren't theoretical. They were forensic. Each one was likely a response to a specific event, something that had happened to someone, something Dale had observed or been told. The rules were not instructions for what might go wrong. They were instructions for what had already gone wrong, distilled into behavioral boundaries and handed to the next group of people going in. Around 7:30, Ruth stopped. She held up a hand and we both halted. She was looking at the ground ahead of her, sweeping her headlamp slowly left to right. "There's a trail here," she said. I moved up beside her. She was right. Cutting across our path, running roughly north-south along the contour of the slope, was a trail. It was narrow, maybe 18 inches wide, but it was clearly defined. Packed earth, no leaf litter, slight wear on the edges. It looked like it had been walked recently and often. I pulled out the map. Our sector was shaded in yellow. There were 2 maintained trails marked in the wider drainage, the ridgeline loop to the east and an old fire road to the north. Neither of them came within half a mile of where we were standing. Rule 3. Do not follow any trail that is not on your issued map. Ruth had already stepped back from it. Paulson came up on my left and looked at the trail, then at me, then at Ruth. "Note the coordinates," Ruth said. "That's all we do." I took out the GPS, marked the waypoint, and wrote the coordinates on a piece of flagging tape. Paulson tied it to a branch at head height. We stepped over the trail and continued on our bearing. I want to describe what it felt like to step over that trail, because it matters. There was nothing overtly wrong with it. It was just a trail. But something in the way it sat in the forest was incorrect. The forest floor on either side of it was deep with leaves, rotting wood, moss, the layered organic debris of decades, and then this clean, narrow line of bare earth running in both directions until the darkness swallowed it. It was too maintained. Nothing in the drainage was maintained. There was no reason for that trail to exist. And yet, it looked like someone walked it every day. I stepped over it the way you step over a crack in ice when you're not sure how deep the water is underneath. Quickly, without stopping. We continued searching for another 2 hours. The night deepened. The air got colder. We called Trent's name into the dark every 30 seconds and heard nothing back. The forest did not feel hostile exactly. It felt indifferent. But it was a strange kind of indifference, like the attention of something so large that it doesn't register individual beings, the way you don't notice individual ants on a sidewalk. Around 9:45, my radio crackled. It was Dale. "All teams base. Weather advisory. Fog moving into the drainage from the west. Visibility may decrease significantly in the next hour. Maintain team cohesion. If visibility drops below 30 feet, hold position and radio in. I looked west. I couldn't see fog, but the darkness was absolute in that direction, and I wouldn't have been able to see it coming until it was on us. We adjusted our pace, tightening the triangle. Ruth slowed down. Paulson moved closer to me. We were maybe 10 feet apart now, and the forest felt different at that distance. Smaller, like our headlamps were carving out a pocket of real space that the darkness kept pressing in on. At 10:10, Paulson said, "Stop." We stopped. "Listen," he said. I listened. At first, nothing. Then I heard it. A sound so faint it was almost indistinguishable from the ambient noise of the forest at night. The creek below us, the wind in the canopy, the small sounds of animals moving through leaf litter. But underneath all of that, something else. A rhythm. Not mechanical. Organic. It sounded like breathing, except it was coming from everywhere at once, like the drainage itself was inhaling and exhaling in slow, deep cycles. "You hear that?" Paulson said. "Yes," Ruth said. She didn't sound scared. She sounded careful. "Is that wind?" I asked. "No," Paulson said. "Wind doesn't pulse like that. That's been going on for about 5 minutes. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." We stood there listening. The sound continued slow, measured, rhythmic. It wasn't loud. It was pervasive. It was the kind of sound that once you noticed it, you couldn't stop hearing. And the thing that disturbed me most was the realization that it might have been going on the entire time we'd been in the drainage, and I'd simply not been listening closely enough to distinguish it from the rest of the forest noise. Ruth keyed her radio. "Base Team 3. A pause. Static. Then Dale's voice, slightly compressed by the signal. "Go ahead, Team 3. "We're hearing a low-frequency rhythmic sound in our sector. Sounds like respiration, coming from no identifiable direction. It's been ongoing for at least 5 minutes. Requesting guidance." A longer pause than I expected. Then, "Copy, Team 3. Note the time and your coordinates. Continue search. If the sound changes in character or intensity, radio immediately." Ruth acknowledged and clipped her radio back. We continued. The fog arrived at 10:40. It didn't roll in. It materialized. One moment the trees were sharp in our headlamp beams, and the next they were softened, gauzy, the light scattering off moisture in the air. Within 10 minutes, visibility was down to about 40 feet. We tightened up further. I could see Ruth's back and Paulson's left shoulder and very little else. We were moving along a natural bench in the terrain, a relatively flat area between two steep drainages, when Ruth stopped again. This time she didn't hold up a hand. She just stopped, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. "There's a clearing," she said. I came up beside her. The fog made it hard to judge distances, but she was right. Ahead of us, the trees opened up, not gradually the way a forest thins near a meadow or a blowdown. They just stopped, as if the forest had been cut with a knife. Beyond the tree line was open ground maybe 60 feet across, covered in low grass and a few low plants I couldn't identify in the dark. And in the center of the clearing, visible through the fog as a dark angular shape, was a structure. It was small, a cabin or a large shed, single story, with a peaked roof. The walls were dark. Couldn't tell if they were wood or stone. There was a doorway on the side facing us, but no door in it. Just a rectangle of deeper darkness. Rule 5. If you reach a clearing that contains any standing structure, do not enter it. Do not examine it. Do not photograph it. Paulson was beside me now. "Coordinates," he said quietly. I checked the GPS. The coordinates placed us well within our assigned sector. There was no structure marked anywhere on the map within 2 miles of our position. I marked the waypoint. Ruth was already on the radio. "Base Team 3, we've reached a clearing at..." She read off the coordinates. "There's a structure here. Single story, small footprint. Appears to be a cabin or outbuilding. Not on the map. Requesting guidance per Protocol 5. Dale responded faster this time. Copy Team 3. Do not approach the structure. Do not enter the clearing. Mark the coordinates and withdraw on your original bearing. Report to base. Copy base. Withdrawing now. She turned to face us. In the fog with the headlamp, her face was hard to read. We go back the way we came. I nodded. Paulson nodded. We turned around. That's when I heard the voice. It came from the clearing, from the direction of the structure, and it said, very clearly, "Hello, is someone there? I need help." It was a man's voice. It sounded tired, strained, the way a person sounds who's been sitting in the cold for hours and is starting to lose hope. I stopped. My entire body wanted to turn around. Every reflex I had as a volunteer, as a person, as someone who had signed up specifically to find people who were lost and bring them back. Every part of that conditioning fired at once. Rule 2. If you locate the missing subject, do not approach alone. Radio your position, then wait. If no one responds within 5 minutes, mark the location with your flagging tape and withdraw toward your team. Do not stay with the subject. And Rule 4. If you hear your name called by a voice you do not immediately recognize as a member of your team who is currently in your visual range, do not respond verbally. The voice hadn't said my name. It hadn't said anyone's name. It was just a plea. A person asking for help. "That could be Trent," I said. Ruth didn't turn around. "Radio it in." I wanted to argue, but I didn't. I keyed the radio. Base, Team 3. We're hearing a voice from the direction of the structure in the clearing. Male voice. Sounds distressed. Possible subject contact. Requesting permission to approach. Dale's response was immediate and flat. Negative, Team 3. Do not approach. Do not engage. Withdraw on your bearing and return to staging. Acknowledge. Base. There is someone in that clearing who may need medical attention. We can hear him. Team 3, acknowledge the instruction. Withdraw, now. I looked at Ruth. She was watching me. Paulson had his hand on my arm, not gripping, just resting there. "Evan," Ruth said. "We follow the card." The voice came again. "Please, I can see your lights. Please don't leave." Something about that sentence. I can see your lights. We were standing at the tree line with our headlamps on, facing away from the clearing. Our lights were pointed into the forest, not toward the structure. If someone were in that clearing looking toward us, they would see the glow, maybe, the backscatter off the fog. But they would not be able to see our lights directly. They would see 3 dark shapes at the edge of the trees with halos of diffused light pointed away from them. Unless they were not in the clearing, unless they were closer than the voice sounded, I turned off my headlamp. Ruth and Paulson did the same, almost simultaneously, and in the sudden darkness, I could see the clearing more clearly, lit only by ambient starlight filtering through the fog. The structure sat there, dark and solid, and the clearing around it was empty. There was no one standing in it, no one sitting, no one visible at all. But the voice came again, and this time it was closer. Not by much, maybe 10 feet. And it said, "I've been here a long time. My legs don't work right anymore. I'm on the ground. You have to come to me." Paulson pulled me, not gently. He grabbed my pack strap and physically hauled me backward, and then we were moving, all 3 of us, no lights, navigating by the GPS glow and by the feel of the slope under our feet. We moved fast, faster than was safe on that terrain in the dark, and behind us the voice continued to speak, though I could no longer make out the words. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't desperate, it was measured, patient, like someone reading from a script they'd used before. We didn't stop until we'd put 500 meters between us and the clearing. Ruth turned her headlamp back on, and I could see that her hands were steady, but her breathing was fast, and there was something in her eyes that I recognized. Not fear. Grief. The expression of someone who has just done something that goes against their fundamental nature and knows it was correct and hates it anyway. She radioed base. "Team 3 returning. ETA 30 minutes. Copy, Team 3. We walked in silence for a while. The rhythmic breathing sound was still there, underneath everything, but I'd stopped trying to identify it. I was thinking about the voice, about how it had known to say the things that would be hardest to walk away from. Not threats, not lures, not supernatural phenomena, just a person asking for help. The most ordinary, human, unignorable sound in the world. And I was thinking about Rule 2. Don't stay with the subject. The rule assumed you would find someone. It assumed you would hear them, see them, confirm their presence, and then it told you to leave them there. What kind of experience produces that rule? What did Dale see, or what was Dale told, that made him write down in official county protocol on a laminated card that the correct procedure for finding a lost person in Black Hollow is to mark their location and walk away? We were about 15 minutes from the staging area when I noticed the trail again. It crossed our path in the same place, the same clean, narrow line of bare earth. We stopped at its edge, and I checked the GPS. Same coordinates I'd marked earlier, within a few meters. We were on the correct bearing. This was the same trail, but I looked at it more carefully this time, and I saw something I'd missed before, or something that hadn't been there before. On the far side of the trail, pressed into the soft earth at the trail's edge, was a boot print. A single boot print facing in the direction the trail led south. It was fresh, the edges were sharp, the tread pattern clearly defined, and it was large. Larger than mine, and I wear 12. I looked at Ruth. She looked at the print, then at me. Note it, she said. Don't follow it. I marked it. We stepped over the trail again and continued. When we reached the staging area, 3 other teams were already back. Dale was at his truck, talking on the radio with the remaining teams still in the field. He saw us come out of the tree line and watched us approach. He didn't ask what happened. He waited. Ruth gave the debrief. She was precise and clinical: the trail, the clearing, the structure, the voice, our withdrawal. Dale listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a clipboard. When she finished, he asked 3 questions. Did any of you enter the clearing? No. Did any of you respond verbally to the voice? Ruth looked at me. I thought about it. I'd spoken to Ruth, to Paulson. I'd spoken on the radio to Dale. But I hadn't spoken to the voice. I hadn't said, "We're here," or "Hold on," or "We're coming." I'd wanted to, but I hadn't. No, I said. Did any of you feel a strong urge to approach the structure that did not seem proportional to the situation? The question was strange. Not, did you want to help? That would be obvious. He was asking whether the desire to approach felt disproportionate, whether it felt implanted rather than organic. I thought carefully. The urge to help had been powerful, but it had been my urge. It had been consistent with who I was. I would have felt the same pull if I'd heard that voice in any forest, on any search. I told Dale this. He nodded, and something in his expression shifted. Not relief. Something more like confirmation. Okay, he said. Get warm. Eat something. We'll resume at first light. I sat in my car with the heater running and ate a granola bar and tried to understand what had just happened. The logical part of my brain was constructing explanations. The voice could have been another hiker, confused and disoriented. The structure could be an old homestead not recorded on modern maps. The trail could be a game trail maintained by heavy deer traffic. Each individual element had a plausible explanation, and I wanted to stack those explanations together into a coherent, rational framework and move on. But they didn't stack. They leaned against each other and wobbled because the voice had known things. It had known we had lights. It had known to say, "My legs don't work," which is exactly the kind of detail that would prevent a SAR volunteer from leaving if the subject can't walk. You can't just mark the location and come back. The subject needs immediate assistance, and the voice had gotten closer without any sound of movement, without any rustle of leaves or snap of branches. It had simply been nearer, the way a sound source is nearer when you turn up the volume. Around 11:30, I got out of the car to use the tree line, and I saw Dale standing at the edge of the staging area looking into the forest. He was alone. I walked over to him and he heard me coming but didn't turn around. "Dale," I said, "what's in that drainage?" He was quiet for a long time, then he said, "You ever see a sinkhole form?" "On video. Ground looks solid, has always been solid, and then one day it isn't. Something underneath has been hollowing it out. Water, erosion, geological processes that take thousands of years, and the surface just drops, falls into a space that was always there but never visible." "You're saying Black Hollow is a sinkhole?" "I'm saying Black Hollow has places in it that are not on the surface the way you and I understand surfaces. Places that exist in the terrain, the way a room exists inside a house, enclosed, contained, but accessible if you find the door. The clearing your team found tonight, with the structure in it." "I know that clearing. I've seen it on 4 different searches over the last 20 years. It's never in the same location twice. The coordinates are always different, but the clearing is always the same. Same dimensions, same structure, same doorway with no door. That's not possible." "I know. What's in the structure?" "I don't know. No one who's gone in has come back in a condition to describe it." I felt the cold then, not the October cold, but something else, something that had been sitting underneath the cold all night and was only now reaching me. "The 2 missing people," I said, "the ones who were never found. Both of their packs were found within 200 meters of a clearing that matched that description. In both cases, the clearing was gone when the next team went through. Just trees, unbroken forest canopy, as if it had never been there. And the voice?" Dale turned to look at me. In the dark, with only the ambient light from the cars behind us, his face was all plains and shadows. "The voice matches the description of the missing subject in every search where it's been heard. Correct approximate age, correct general vocal quality, but it never identifies itself by name. And it always says things designed to make a rescuer approach. Injury claims, immobility, visibility of your lights. It knows what SAR volunteers are trained to respond to, and it uses that training as a vector." "So the rules are what I've figured out so far. They're not complete. They might not even be entirely correct, but they're the best I have. And nobody has been lost in Black Hollow on a search where the rules were followed." "And on searches where they weren't followed?" He didn't answer that. He looked back at the forest, and after a while he said, "Get some sleep. We go back in at 6. I didn't sleep. I sat in my car and read the laminated card over and over, and each time through, the rules meant something different. Rule 1, maintain visual contact, wasn't about standard team safety. It was about witnesses. If you can see your team can see you, and whatever is in the drainage apparently operates in the gaps between observation. Rule 3, don't follow trails not on the map, because the trails lead to the clearings, and the clearings are the access points, the doors Dale talked about. Rule 6, if you believe you've been somewhere before, but your instruments say otherwise, because the drainage can fold, can repeat, can put you back where you were. And the instinct to keep moving when you feel lost is exactly the instinct that carries you deeper into the fold. And rule 2, don't stay with the subject, because the subject might not be the subject, and even if they are, the place where you find them might not remain a place you can leave. We went back in at first light. The fog had lifted, but the sky was low and gray, and the forest looked different in the daylight, less menacing, more simply vast. The drainage was enormous. Looking down into it from the staging area, I could see the canopy stretching unbroken for miles, the trees so dense that the ground beneath them was invisible. Dale reorganized the teams. I was still with Ruth and Paulson, but we were assigned a different sector further west, closer to the drainage bottom, an area of heavy hemlock near the creek. The other teams were sweeping the slopes above us. We descended. The creek at the bottom of the drainage was running clear and cold, maybe 8 feet across, cutting through moss-covered sandstone. The hemlock grew thick along its banks, and under their canopy the light was dim even at midday. It was a difficult place to search. Visibility was limited, the terrain was uneven, and the creek noise masked other sounds. For 2 hours, nothing happened. We searched systematically, calling Trent's name, checking under deadfall, scanning the creek banks for any sign of passage. The rhythmic sound from the night before was absent, or at least I couldn't hear it over the water. Around 8:30, Ruth found flagging tape. It was orange, tied to a hemlock branch at chest height, and it had coordinates written on it in black marker. I checked the numbers against my GPS. They didn't match our current position. They were from somewhere else in the drainage, a location about 400 meters to the northeast. The handwriting was neat, blocky, institutional. It looked like it had been written by someone following protocol. "This is from a previous search," Ruth said. She untied it carefully and turned it over. On the back, in smaller writing, was a date, October 14th, 2011. The 2011 search. The woman with the bird surveys. Someone on her search team had tied this flagging tape 8 years ago, 400 meters from here, and now it was here, in our sector, tied to a tree at fresh height. "That's not possible either," I said, and it was starting to feel like a refrain. Ruth put the flagging tape in her pocket without commenting. We continued. At 9:15, Paulson found the boot print again. It was by the creek, pressed into a sandbar. The same tread pattern, the same size, but this time there were more of them. A line of prints leading up the creek, northward, spaced at a walking pace. They were fresh, the sand still holding moisture in the depressions. Someone had walked up this creek within the last few hours. "Those aren't from any of our teams," Ruth said. "Nobody was assigned to the creek bottom." "Trent?" I asked. "Trent was wearing trail runners, size 10. These are boots, size 13, 14. We followed the prints with our eyes. They led upstream, around a bend in the creek, and disappeared from view. The urge to follow them was strong. They were physical evidence, tangible, real, not a disembodied voice or an impossible structure, but actual footprints in actual sand. Following footprints is fundamental, SAR. It's what you do. Rule 3 pressed against my sternum through the laminated card. Don't follow any trail not on the map. Were footprints a trail? The rule said trail, path, or cleared route. Footprints were none of those things. But the spirit of the rule was clear. Don't follow anything in this drainage that leads you somewhere you didn't choose to go. Ruth radioed base, reported the prints. Dale told us to mark them and continue our sweep, which we did. But I kept looking upstream, and I kept thinking about who was making those prints, and where they were going, and whether they were choosing to go there. We searched until noon. The rest of the day was uneventful in the way that Black Hollow made everything feel eventful. Every shadow had weight. Every sound had a question mark attached to it. Every stretch of normal forest felt like a held breath. But we found no further sign of Trent, no more clearings, no more voices. At the midday briefing, Dale told us that Team 1 searching the northeast sector had found something. He didn't say what. He told us to take a break, eat, hydrate. He spoke privately with the 2 members of Team 1 for several minutes, and I watched them from across the staging area. One of them, a man I didn't know, was sitting on the bumper of a truck with his hands between his knees, staring at the ground. The other was talking to Dale with small, tight gestures, the way people talk when they're describing something they don't fully believe. After the briefing, I approached the man on the bumper. His name, I learned later, was Corwin. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were focused but distant, like someone doing math in their head while looking at you. "We found a clearing," he said. "Different sector from yours. Northeast, up near the ridgeline. Same description, open ground, cabin or shed in the middle, doorway with no door. Same clearing, or a different one? I don't know. Dale says it's the same one. I don't know how that works. We were over a mile from where your team reported it last night." "Did you hear the voice?" He shook his head. "No voice, but there was something in the doorway." not a person, a shape. It was dark in there, darker than it should have been. I mean, it was mid-morning. There should have been light getting in, but the doorway was just black. And inside the black, something was standing. I couldn't see it, not really. I could see the space it was taking up, like a hole inside a hole. He said this calmly, the way you describe something after you've spent several hours trying to convince yourself it was a trick of the light and have failed. Did you go in? I asked. No. God, no. We followed the card, marked it, reported it, withdrew. He paused. But here's the thing. While I was standing there looking at the doorway, I had this thought. It wasn't my thought. I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, it arrived like a text message. It just appeared in my mind fully formed. The thought was, if you step inside, you'll understand the drainage, all of it, every search, every missing person, every sound. You'll see the whole system. And I wanted to. Not because I was curious, because it felt like an obligation, like I'd signed up for this, and the clearing was the actual work, and everything else, the grid search, the whistles, the calling his name was just theater. He stopped talking. I didn't push him. After a while, he said, Ruth told me you heard the voice last night. Yeah. What did it feel like? When it talked? I thought about it. Like being asked to do my job by something that doesn't understand what my job actually is. It had the words right, but the context was wrong. Like a phishing email that uses all the correct logos. He almost smiled. Yeah, that's pretty close. The afternoon search began at 1 p.m. Dale changed the sectors again. He moved us further from the drainage bottom, higher on the slopes, away from the hemlock and the creek. I noticed he kept all teams above a certain elevation. Nobody was sent back to the bottom. At 2:45, we found Gerald Trent. He was sitting at the base of a large red oak, about 3/4 of a mile from the trailhead, in an area that had been searched the previous afternoon by a different team. He was conscious. He was hypothermic, dehydrated, and confused, but he was alive, and he was sitting in open forest on the slope. No clearing, no structure, no trail, just a man at the bottom of a tree. Ruth saw him first. She stopped, held up her hand, and said, Subject contact, visual only. Single individual seated, appears conscious. I looked. Trent matched his description, late 50s, gray beard, blue jacket, hiking boots. His eyes were open, and he was looking at us. Not toward us. At us. Specifically. As if he'd been waiting. Rule 2. Do not approach alone. Radio your position, then wait. Ruth keyed her radio. Base Team 3, subject contact, coordinates. She read them off. Single adult male matching subject description. Conscious, seated, appears non-ambulatory. Requesting support for approach. Dale's voice. Copy, Team 3. Hold your position. Team 2 is closest. ETA 12 minutes. Do not approach until Team 2 arrives. Confirm. Confirmed. Holding position. We stood there 50 feet from Gerald Trent, and we waited. He watched us. After a moment, he said, Are you here for me? His voice was thin, raspy, the voice of a man who'd been outdoors for over 24 hours without adequate water. It sounded real. It sounded human. It sounded like a person who needed help and was looking at 3 people with SAR packs standing 50 feet away, not moving. Mr. Trent, Ruth called. We're with Franklin County Search and Rescue. We have another team coming to assist. We need you to stay where you are. Can you do that? Yes. I can't really move anyway. My legs are, I don't know. They're numb. My legs don't work right anymore. The voice from the clearing had said almost the same thing, but this was different. This was daylight. This was open forest. This was a man who matched every detail of the missing person report, and he was looking at us with eyes that were tired and scared and human in a way that the voice last night had not been, because the voice last night had been patient, and the patience had been wrong. I stood there for 12 minutes, watching a man who needed help not helping him. It was the longest 12 minutes of my life. It went against everything. And Ruth stood beside me, and she had done this before, and I could see what it had cost her. Team 2 arrived, 6 of us now. Dale had ordered the approach to be made with at least 2 teams present. Ruth and another volunteer approached Trent, while the rest of us maintained a perimeter not around him, around them, watching the tree line, watching for anything that shouldn't be there. Ruth reached him. She knelt beside him. She did the initial assessment: airway, breathing, circulation, obvious injuries. He was hypothermic but stable. His legs were functional. The numbness was from sitting in the cold. She got a space blanket around him and gave him water, small sips. While she worked, she asked him questions, standard stuff: his name, the date, where he was, what happened. He answered, Gerald Trent. He thought it was still Thursday. He was in Black Hollow. What happened was harder. I was on the trail, he said, the ridgeline loop, and I saw a path going down into the drainage. It looked maintained, like someone took care of it. I thought maybe it led to a campsite or a viewpoint, so I followed it. Rule 3, don't follow any trail not on the map. It went down the slope for a while, maybe a quarter mile, and then it opened up into a clearing. There was a little cabin, old, real old, but the doorway was open, and I thought maybe someone was living out there. Maybe they could tell me if I was still on the right track. Rule 5, do not enter any standing structure. Did you go inside? Ruth asked. Trent's face changed, not dramatically, just a small contraction around the eyes, like someone touching a bruise. I stood in the doorway, he said. I didn't go in. I just looked in. And it was... He stopped. It was bigger inside. I know that doesn't make sense. The cabin was maybe 10 by 12 from the outside, but inside, it went back, way back. And it was dark, but not empty. There were spaces, like rooms, but not rooms. Like the space kept folding, and every fold went further in. And at the very back, in the very last fold, there was someone standing there. A person? I don't know. It was shaped like a person, but it was too still. Not still like someone standing still. Still like a photograph. Still like something that has never moved and doesn't know what movement is. He drank more water. His hands were shaking, but not just from the cold. I backed away from the doorway. I turned around, and the clearing was gone. I was just in the forest. The path was gone. The cabin was gone. The clearing was gone. Just trees. And I didn't know where I was. And my phone didn't have signal. And I walked. I walked for hours. I think I walked all night. And then it was morning, and I was here. And I sat down. And I waited. That's all. No. He looked at Ruth, and then at me, and then back at Ruth. I could still feel it, the thing in the doorway. After I left, after the clearing was gone, I could still feel it, the way you can feel someone watching you from across a room. It's still there. It's still watching. Not just me. Everything. The whole drainage. It's not trapped in that cabin. The cabin is where it's closest to the surface, but it's everywhere under here. It's the thing underneath. We evacuated Trent. It took about an hour to get him to the staging area with rest breaks. He walked with assistance. His legs worked, but he was weak. He didn't talk during the hike out. He just moved one foot in front of the other, with the careful focus of someone trying to stay on the surface of something. At the staging area, the paramedics took over. Trent's wife was there. She held him, and he held her. And whatever he'd seen in the doorway of that cabin was temporarily pushed below the surface by the simple mammalian reality of someone you love putting their arms around you. Dale debriefed the teams. He was thorough, unhurried. He collected the laminated cards. He collected the GPS units. He collected the flagging tape from Ruth's pocket and looked at the date on it for a long time without speaking. After the debrief, as people were loading up their cars, I went to Dale one more time. You've been coordinating searches in this drainage for 20 years, I said. How many times have you seen the clearing? I've never seen it myself, he said. I've had it described to me by reliable people on 9 separate occasions. The description is always consistent. Structure, clearing dimensions, the quality of the darkness inside. The descriptions come from different years, different seasons, different search subjects, but it's the same place. And the thing Trent described, the thing standing inside? Some people see it, some don't. The ones who see it describe it the same way every time. Something that doesn't move, something that's been there a long time, longer than the cabin, longer than the forest. What does it want? Dale put his clipboard in the truck and closed the tailgate. I don't think want is the right word. I think it includes. The drainage is its surface, and the clearing is where the surface gets thin, and the cabin is where the surface has a hole in it. People fall through, not because it pulls them, because they step too close to the edge and the ground gives way. The voice, the trails, the way the clearing moves around those aren't lures. They're currents, the way water has currents. The drainage funnels things downhill, and some of those things are people, and at the bottom is the hole. Then the rules. The rules are how you walk on thin ice. You don't jump, you don't stop, you stay spread out so the weight is distributed. You don't follow the cracks. And if you see someone who's already fallen through, you don't reach in after them because the ice will break under you too. He got in his truck. Before he closed the door, he said, "You did well in there. The card works if you let it. Most people let it. And the ones who don't? They find the clearing. And the clearing is always open." I drove home. It was dark again by the time I got there. I showered, ate, sat on my couch. The house was quiet and warm and exactly the right size, and every room had the dimensions it was supposed to have, and no room went back further than its walls. But I kept thinking about the drainage, about the rhythmic breathing sound that had been there all night, underneath everything, about how it might still be there, right now, in the dark, pulsing through the sandstone and the tree roots and the creek water, about the thing Trent described not trapped, not contained, not even present in the way that a creature is present. Just there, the way bedrock is there, the way the water table is there. Something so deep and so fundamental that the surface world is just a skin over it, and the skin has thin spots, and the cabin is where the skin has worn through entirely. I think about Rule 2 most of all. Don't stay with the subject, the most unnatural rule on the card, the one that requires you to override every instinct that makes you a good person in order to remain a living one. Dale wrote that rule because someone, at some point, found a person in the drainage and stayed with them, and the clearing formed around both of them, and neither one came out. I know this because I asked Ruth 3 weeks later over coffee at a diner in town. She confirmed it. 2004. The first missing person. A volunteer from the search team went into the clearing to help a man she'd found sitting at the base of a tree, not inside the clearing, but near it, close enough that when she crouched down to help him, the clearing was suddenly around them both. The rest of the team saw it happen. They said the trees just opened up, like curtains being drawn, and the cabin was there, and the doorway was open, and both the volunteer and the missing man were inside the clearing, and then they were inside the cabin, and then the clearing was gone, like a sinkhole, like the ground swallowing a house. The volunteer's name was Margaret Olin. She was 43. She had 2 sons. She was never found. The man she was trying to help was never found either. Dale wrote Rule 2 the next day. I still volunteer for SAR. I've done 2 more call-outs since Black Hollow, both in other parts of the forest, both routine. I haven't been called back to the drainage. I hope I won't be. But if I am, I'll go, and I'll carry the card, and I'll follow the rules. Not because I understand the drainage. I don't. I don't think Dale does either. Not fully. He's mapped the surface of something whose depth he can't measure, and the rules are his map. And like all maps of dangerous terrain, they are incomplete by necessity. I follow the rules because of Margaret Olin, because she did what any good person would do. She went to help someone who needed help, in a place that was waiting for exactly that impulse. And the drainage took her. The rules don't keep you safe because the drainage respects them. The rules keep you safe because they keep you from being who you actually are in the one place where being who you actually are is the thing that destroys you. They are a leash on your own compassion, and wearing that leash is the price of walking out. I keep the laminated card. I know I'm not supposed to. Dale collects them after every search, but I palmed mine during the debrief and slipped it into my jacket pocket, and I've kept it in my nightstand since that night. Sometimes, late at night, I take it out and read the rules, and I try to imagine the specific event behind each one, the specific person who didn't follow it, the specific moment the ground opened. I think about Gerald Trent, sitting at the base of that oak, watching us watch him, knowing we couldn't come to him, and not understanding why. I think about how he said he could still feel it, and I think about how, if I'm honest, I can still feel it too, not as a presence, not as a threat, but as a depth, a knowledge that underneath the world I walk on every day, there is something older, and it is not asleep, and it is not aware, and it does not want. It simply has a shape, and the shape has an opening, and the opening has been there longer than the trees, and it will be there after the trees are gone. The drainage is patient in the way that gravity is patient. It doesn't reach for you. It just waits for you to step over the edge, and the rules are the only map of where the edges are.